and welcome back. Joining us in studio this morning is the Honorable Prime Minister John Briceño, who's here to discuss with us, among other things, the budget and, of course, its rollout for the next fiscal year. Good morning, PM Briceño.
Good morning. Morning to both of you. As always, thank you so much for inviting me to open your eyes. And I know it takes a little bit of effort since you have to get up very early. But I was told not to complain, so I will not complain. So.
Yes. PM, before we get into what you're primarily here to share with us this morning, I would like to get your take on what took place in Rinjawak over the weekend, primarily because it's in your backyard. I mean, these are people who, by extension, you would be familiar with as a political leader in the North.
Well, first of all, I need to start off by offering my condolences to the family. I think it was a senseless death. It's something that could have been avoided. I don't think I could go into great detail as to what happened because obviously there will have to be an investigation as to find out exactly what happened. But it shows two things, or maybe a number of things, or I'll put it to three. First of all is that, one, that as a citizen, if the police tells you to stop, you should stop. And I was told that these young men were racing in tongue away from police. And maybe you don't want to stop where it's dark, but once you get by the park or in front of a store, okay, stop and let the police do whatever it is that they want to do. Secondly, secondly, it shows also a lack of either a lack of respect for the police, or a lack of confidence in the police, because many times they believe that the police will brutalize them. So that's my second point: the lack of respect and the lack of not having the trust on the police. And the third one is also the lack of proper training on the part of the police department, of our police officers. It is obvious that our police officers need more training, need regular training especially when it comes to firearms, pulling a gun in public. If you could recall, maybe you might not recall, but for a very long time, you would never see a policeman walking around in the streets with a gun. They were not allowed to carry a gun. But things have changed, and criminals have got more brazen and more dangerous, and so in some instances, the police would walk around with a gun. But there are many instances that there's no need for the policemen to be about with guns. I've seen instances where there's they're at a checkpoint and they have these huge guns, and all right, if you have to have it, at least just have it in the vehicle after they show it, that kind of stuff displayed. So it's a tragedy from all aspects, from the family that lost a loved one, to the police department, and to the community.
Perfect.
PM, we were initially asked to have a brief discussion on the budget presentation and the debate that took place last week. Kudos for the 3 days. I do think it was necessary because you got to hear everybody.
Yes.
In a formal fashion. Everybody was able to say their piece. I want to start off by asking a question that I think I was asking long before you came to sit, and it is about how the budget is prioritized. I understand that, and of course you all say your piece and how much monies are dispersed into these different ministries and these different departments. And I also understand that different departments have to provide proposals as to how the monies is going to be spent. But in terms of priority and where you as your government feel that these funds need to be initially issued to this particular ministry at this particular time, how do you do that? How do these initial statements begin, and then how do you then go and converse with the rest of the ministries about it?
I think the first thing we need to take into account is that a large portion of the budget, there's not much we can do about that. Has to be salaries for the teachers and the workers and the public officers and the BDF and everything, and also then the fuel and electricity, I mean everything that goes with running a
All the
government.
housekeeping materials.
Yes, that's over 60% of the budget. I mean, and then, so that, you know you have to do that. And then you have your budget, then you have your loan payments, interest payments, and so all of that. That would go away with us over 70% of the budget.
Okay.
Then after that, then you look at what are your priorities as a government. Well, our priorities as a government is simply, well, as we said, our number one is to reduce poverty in half within 10 years, to reduce the trade deficit by 10 years, to lead to full employment, and to create opportunities especially for young people and women. So when you look at that, and then the issue, then of course the last one is citizen security. And citizen security is not only that you're protected by the police, but that there are good parks, there are good hospitals, there are good areas you could take your children. You know, you could feel that you live in a really good country, that things are in place for you. Once we could keep those things in mind, then we know what our priorities. So we know that we have to be able to invest in education. As it is right now, we have expanding the free education program. We started in Southside Belize City because that's where we have the biggest social program and social challenges that we have, and in a very small geographic area. Secondly, now we're going down south to do the same thing in the Toledo district, where I have the highest levels of poverty. Then we have to look at the economy. What are the things that needs to be done for the economy? And infrastructure plays a critical role in the economy. Not only building the highways, but for instance, paving the road from San Esteban to Orange Rock Town, the one from Guinea Grass to Orange Rock Town. These are very important arteries that our people, not only sugar, but agriculture, the sugar industry, but in agriculture and they use. So we have to be able to build that network of roads that can move products from one end to the next very quickly. Working with investment, the Ministry of Investment and Beltrade, where again we're trying to find ways how we can get our MSMEs to become a part of the formal economy by offering them incentives, offering them opportunities, that they could get their tax ID and then register with GST without no penalties for a period of time, allowing them to be able to import as much as $1 million over 4 years of equipment without having to pay taxes, setting aside 20% of the next coming year budgets for small businesses to be able to get some of the government businesses. So we have to be able to work on that. Obviously, the issue of citizen security continues to be in the minds of everyone. So we are hiring more, do a new police intake, the BDF, Coast Guard. So from there, then you start to work down, and then you start to see where is it that you have to be able to invest. Health. The PUP government under Right Honorable Said Musa implemented the National Health Insurance Program. And under the UDP, they did very little with it. I think the year before the election, the then Minister Pablo Marin instituted NHI basically for Corozal Bay, his constituency. What we did with the very same budget, we rolled out NHI for the entire district of Corozal, providing even more services. Now we're going to introduce it now into the Orange Rock district this coming cycle. So that is how we start to look at our priorities, and and working with the Ministry of Agriculture, how we're going to work with we have some serious problems in front of us. Citrus is in trouble, bananas in trouble, shrimp is in problems. Ironically, the one we talk the most, which is sugar, is probably the strongest industry at this moment. I'm not saying that things are all well, but they are in the strongest footing as it is right now.
But it's mired by its own politics, though.
But yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Ironically, they're the one making the biggest noise, and I wish that the BSCFA can sit down with BSI and logically walk through and come up with an agreement between both sides. But so we have these problems down south. So the minister is already looking at what steps can be taken to turn things around in these industries, and how we can open new markets. We've opened markets for cattle, and now we have to ensure that our products like pork and chicken and eggs and vegetables that we can also export into Mexico and Guatemala. Now they tell you, oh, we can compete in some of these products. Maybe we cannot, but the Petén, for instance, Petén area has about 1 million people, and they have to eat, and they're far away from the other areas that produces some of the things that we are producing, and we're next door, so we could take advantage of that. So that is how we start looking at the budget. And then secondly, then as a cabinet, we had a retreat very early this year, again, to talk about those very same priorities. Then, but from before that, from October, we start to make what you call a budget call. So every ministry have to hand in what it. And then to finalize the budget, what we did is that I insisted that every minister and the CEO need to meet with us in the Ministry of Finance. So we could go through line item by line item, trying to find how best we could accommodate their requests, because the requests are huge, but the resources are limited.
Yeah.
And so that's pretty much the process.
Yeah.
It's a lengthy process, tedious, tiring, and
The
sometimes
question was
boring.
asked because, when the LOO came up, he had his own, right? And I started to wonder, okay, if you are going to prioritize health and civil security over education and human development, where do you strategize? And that is why I had initially.
But human development and
throw this
poverty
in?
and social programs, all of them, sports, all of them play a very important role. All of them are linked. It's not things that by isolation. No?
Can I throw this in, perhaps just as a point of reflection? I think when it was initially announced that the leader of the opposition would present his own take on the budget,
I'm still waiting for it.
and that's the thing, for me, my opinion, I think it sort of fell flat, at least to my expectations, because I was sort of waiting to hear what the solutions would have been, what would he be able to put forward comparatively, and I didn't get that. I sort of got this thing where, okay, we're criticizing the present budget, but then we're not really offering, and again, that's only my perspective.
Well, I think when I was the leader of the opposition, I made sure that we could also be offering some alternatives. And I think I really believe more and more, I think that the media needs to fact check the leader of the opposition. He throws out numbers. I have no idea where he gets it. At one point, he is criticizing the numbers from SIB. Oh, they're fake. Like, for instance, the 5% unemployment. And right after that, he starts saying, well, SIB is saying inflation is going up. So, when it's convenient to him, he accepts it. When convenient is, he then says, at one moment, he said, well, citing some IMF report that said that the UDP government had record growth or something. And I was look at him and said, I've never seen that report. So I said, can you show me the report? He says, yes, I'll give it to you. Obviously, I'm not going to get it. And then I said, have you even read this present report? And he didn't. So when you do that, then to put it nicely, you fall flat. Because then you lose credibility. People say, well, what on earth are you talking about? When he's saying that the UDP had the lowest unemployment rate of 4.5%, and you go through the entire SIB records, you never see anything like that. I mean, it is our government that have been fortunate, hard work, to be able to have a 5% unemployment rate. But what they are trying to say, you only think about the people that want to work, but that is how it is measured worldwide. You cannot include you, Isani, if you don't, if you're not interested in working. You look at the people that work. Now, in Belize, and I explained it earlier on a previous host meeting, is that presently we have, I think, about 58%, somewhere around that number. Don't quote me, hold me to hard and fast to that number, but it's around 58% of the people that are seeking employment of the total 100%. It's usually it's around, I'm told, it's around 65%, again, give or take. Why is that? Well, you have a number of people that are not interested for work. But secondly, Belize has a large informal market.
Yeah.
And that is why we're doing a lot of work with the MSMEs to be able to get all of these small people that are selling tacos out there, for instance, those that are out there selling clothes on the street corners or have their own small business in their own home. You know, this is what we call the informal market. You have a lot of small people, farmers that, you know, are growing in tomatoes and cabbage, and then they go out and sell it. That's a part of the informal market. So we know we're trying to find how we could bring them into the formal market. So then the people that are actively or officially participating in the economy can then properly be counted. So that is what we're attempting. But the fact is that since we have taken over, the economy has been growing way faster than anybody expected. I will confess, when IMF said we were doing 3%, we were going to do 3%, we were saying we know we're going to do more than 3%. We were looking at least double that, 6%, as much as 8%. But things worked out so well for us, that we hit 15%. And this last year again we hit about 12.4%. So but these don't happen by happenstance. It happened by chance. It happened because we had a plan. We knew we had to work on agriculture. We knew we had to grow up with tourism. We knew we had to work on the services and the BPOs. Facilitating things for them, making sure that they can come and to come to settle or to set up shop in Belize as quickly as possible. And also meeting with them, talking with them, see what are the challenges they're facing, what we could do to change things for them to be able to operate easier in Belize. And that because of taking those steps, we're benefiting from that.
How would you respond to a concern or a position being taken from the opposition bench, where the member for Albert was saying, look, you're already coming in at a $200 million deficit or shortfall in terms of the budget. And so that would perhaps prompt your administration to come back for supplementaries down the road.
That's not true, because we've already shown how we're going to pay the deficit. It's worked out. What is important is to see the size of the deficit. And we're keeping the deficit a little over 1% this budget cycle. And then your primary budget is also one of the most important part. That is where you find out whether you're collecting enough taxes or revenues to be able to pay your salaries and your bill, because like what was happening with the UDP to the end when they were not collecting enough. So we have a primary deficit right now, initially targeting at about about 0.5%. We want to push it to at least 1% to 1.5%. That's the target. But the primary is the overall deficit is a little over 1%, which is fine by any measures that you take. And then how do you finance it? Well, you finance it several ways. One is the loans that you get from the IMF, from the IDB, from the World Bank, CDBs, the external loans that we get, those monies come in and then that help to meet your fiscal gap. Secondly is any grants that we get, and our biggest donor is the Republic of China, Taiwan, and we're very grateful for being a true friend to Belize. So that's the second portion, the grants, and then the last one is then you get monies from loans from central bank. And so those are the three ways where you bridge. So I think she was being disingenuous when she said we'll have to come for a supplementary to be able to meet the the deficit, because we've already pointed out how is it we're going to cover the deficit that we have in the budget.
I can appreciate the proper debates of Honorable Tracy Pantando, because one of the things that I think we don't think about as citizens and as civilians, how the funds then are being properly managed after the year is completed. A particular ministry like education, you're not going to see the fruits of those labors the following year. So how do you keep,
these are long-term
right?
investments.
So then how do you keep monitoring and making sure that come the next fiscal year you provide proper incentives? How do you go back and look at the budget and say, okay, this is where we fell short, this is where we needed to do work on? How do you keep monitoring, especially in a ministry like education that would require that much monitoring?
Well, you need to look at the metrics. How many kids are going to school? How many in preschool? How are they doing in at the end of school year? How many are going to high school? How many are going to sixth form? And it's unfortunate that when you look 2015 to 2020, the numbers regressed. They did not get better. And so we need then to be able to see how we can fix that. And I really need to give credit to Minister Fonseca. I have great admiration for Minister Fonseca. Minister Fonseca is not a boastful person, you know, and sometimes in politics you have to be a little boastful so that they could hear you out.
Yeah.
But he's very calm, very determined, very strategic in the way he does things. For instance, he was bringing to my attention, he says, Prime Minister, how could we justify building a primary school building in Bella Vista for over $5 million? I mean, how can we justify? We are overbuilding these buildings here. We put too much cement and steel and just make it a huge building. When you say we could do that same building for half the price, you know, and then we could then build elsewhere, you know, or spend $2 million on a preschool, you know, on a preschool building, you know, and that's what the previous government was doing. They were building all of these buildings and just spending crazily. And he said, so he put the brakes on that, and now we are starting to relook at how we're going to be doing all of these buildings more affordable. We are not a rich country, so we have to make sure how we could spend that. Secondly, for the longest they've been talking about curriculum reform, and you know, and everybody fight over that. And he again quietly set up a small team of his technical people, and he included the unions and he included management. Small group, I think it was no more than 12. And they had discussions back and forth for probably maybe a year, if that much. I don't know the exact number. And then he came to cabinet and said, we have setting up a new curriculum, making adjustments. Again, it's not about throwing everything and start over. See how you can fix it and tweak it. Rosanna, my wife, was a part of it, and what he's told earlier, I remember he was because Minister Zabani was also deeply involved with it, and in a meeting with him, she pointed out, he said, Minister, there's a lot of good things in here. So, because, you know, Minister Zabani, you know, you just start out, new minister, first time I guess he's elected. So, well, we have to do this all over. And she said, hold on, there's a lot of good things in here. Now it's how we could strengthen it. Where is the weaknesses? He said, I can tell you, I know that curriculum inside out, I say more than most people, because as a principal. And so that's how it works. And so when you look at what Minister Fonseca has done, quietly transformed that ministry without having to pick fight. That was unfortunately the former minister's weakness, that he quarrelsome and he fight for everything, and you don't need to fight over everything.
Notwithstanding, I want to switch gears into another part of the budget presentation. Are we to seek, or are we about to have any potential threats following to the blue bond, following the Credit Suisse demise?
No, absolutely not. No, that has nothing to do with anything.
Okay.
I wish I could have said that because they gone bankrupt, then that loan disappears.
Right.
But no, another institution has taken over Credit Suisse, so the same agreement is just going to continue. But it's important to point out, and I know that Sir George quickly, and it slipped my mind in the budget debate. You know, you have so much thing in your head, you try. So, that when they're trying to, the UDP is saying, well, we did the work. Truth of the matter, honestly, they couldn't comprehend. They were looking at the blue bond as something where they could get money for government. There are two different discussions on that, and they simply could not comprehend what was trying to be accomplished, and they could not connect it with the super bond. They were just looking strictly, okay, we're doing a bond for Belize. They say, well, so we get money, and when they were told, no, that money is not going to be free. That money is going to be for conservation efforts, marine conservation efforts. They say, well, we're not into that. Like, if we are doing anything, we want money for could spend. But we were the ones that managed to say to connect it with the super bond. And say, all right, we could connect it and say, talk to the bondholders and say, well, you want to be part of something good? But we pay off, and they wrote off 45%, and then we then come with these new bonds, and then so we use every year a part of the payment goes to the Fisheries Department, to the Coastal Zone Management Authority, and to many small community-based organizations in the coastal regions and the islands, and then also setting up a trust fund, a permanent fund for marine conservation that we expect that by 2040 will be at $100 million US. But what I forgot, and I was reminded afterwards, I said, Prime Minister, don't you remember? I said, you were the first one that worked out on a debt for nature swap. And it was under my time when I was the Minister of Natural Resources. We had that, and then that money, we funneled it, some of the money, especially through PAC, to be able to give out funds for conservation in Belize.
You know that, notwithstanding that being perhaps testimony to financial engineering, that it will still be criticized by the opposition, right? That's to come. Whenever there's...
It's okay to criticize, but don't criticize to a point where you look foolish. And that's what is happening to them. The leader of the opposition, unfortunately, I mean, his performance was really bad. It was disappointing. It was embarrassingly bad. Because he came with no facts, and he just have a lot of writing and living but no actual facts. That he did not do an analysis of the budget and say, well, this is where you are. You said you were going to collect taxes, but you don't collect this. But you said you can do this, but you spend no such thing.
I think that's what we were expecting.
Yes. He did not do that, and even. But I must give some credit to both the honourable member from Albert, Tracy. I mean, and
she came with her figures.
She saw, and so also the same thing with Patrick, who has the experience. He went on a little bit too long, so he lose the thought now when he just all over the place. But again, there was no serious analysis on their part. I remember Blandy Habet, when I had him shadowing the Ministry of Health. He would go there and actually debate that ministry and point out the faults, where they're going wrong, and so forth. But we see nothing of that. And once again, the honourable member from Queen Square, or better known as Sister B, is a no-show. I don't think she spent an hour in the National Assembly since she was elected.
It's pitiful, but I mean, when we're talking the representation of people, because I think in all honesty, she represents a political.
She's offending her people because the people put their trust in her to represent them, and she, basically.
PM, we're a few days from the implementation of the budget itself. April 1st is fast coming. What can we expect? I mean, there is a new budget to be rolled out, but some of the same realities that we're facing as a country persists, and we're going into the next fiscal cycle with those very same realities firmly behind us or in front of us.
Well, it's not like when the new budget coming out of a sudden money on the roll. We just continue with what's going on, and then the new projects. You see, what we have done, we had to take a hard look at what was already in place with the government, the previous government. And it's not a matter that we just throw away everything. We need to work. For instance, and again, they're telling us, you're borrowing too much. But then the projects that we are continuing, are borrowing, are projects that they started. They started the rehabilitation of the Northern Highway from Biscayne.
Yes.
Well, they started the loan. I mean, they now we can't as a government say, okay, well, we don't pave it. We have to do it. And so now every year, like when you borrow for a house, they don't give you a check for the entire house. They give you an
In
amount
phases.
and in phases.
Yes.
So every year we have to come, and again the leader of the opposition embarrass him. So he say, well, you don't get a loan for the Northern Highway. So why they bring? Well, obviously we have to go to the funders and say, okay, we don't use this amount. We need the next amount. You know, we had to relook at the. You all know how strongly we felt about the Caracol Road. Not that it's not important, it's just that we have more important priorities in other areas of the country. Instead of spending, they had about $140 million for that road.
Somewhere thereabout, yeah.
And so Julius, you know, again, being an architect, so he's an engineer per se, you know, he could understand. He sat down with people and said, what can we do to solve this situation? And it was, again, over-designed, just like what Minister Francis is saying. These buildings are being over-designed. The same thing with the roads, it was being over-designed. So we managed to make some adjustments to it, and we saved $28 million on the Caracol Road. Right here, look at this huge bridge. I just now on a crossing, I looked at it, and my driver, my assistant, tell me, he said, Edwin, he said, President, a huge bridge, all over bridge. They had it for $60 million. Actually, the previous government, I think they borrowed 3 times for that money.
Wow.
And then they went on to use it somewhere else, so they don't, but they never built it. So again, when we took a look at it, and we, you know, Julius with his team came to me and said, Prime Minister, we could redesign it and we could do it for half the price. Then I said, okay, we could see. And same M&M, I think, Martin,
Engineering.
they are the ones that are building the bridges for these international companies.
Yeah.
So why are we going to pay these international companies all of that money when our own locals can do it? And they are the ones that are doing the piles and everything, and the columns and beams and everything. So they managed to do it. We're doing it for $30 million, saving $30 million.
One of the words that were being tossed, I think, rather loosely in the House was the word transparency. And that leads me to another bill that is being passed, or right now being debated about, is the NGO bill. And the
NPO.
The NPO bill? Yeah, the nonprofit.
None.
There is a feeling that there's no transparency, and the NGOs believe that they're not being properly consulted, being rushed in the House. What was the need initially for this NPO
Well, it's
bill?
much ado about nothing. But let's start first of all. The NPOs, they're always demanding transparency in government, but many of them, they are given no transparency on the monies that they get, from who they get, and how they spend it. That's a big criticism that I would have to them. Not all of them, please. So I don't want to make, you know, they want when they do it, they say, oh, they say, not all of them, but there are many of them that get money. We don't know from who, and we don't know how it is spent.
There was a registry at some point
But
where
there's
they
a
were trying to
registry,
get them
yes.
in good standing
But
and what
yes,
have you.
yes.
Sorry,
So
go ahead.
coming to that. But it's only a registry, and it was not really implemented the way it is. We, as a country, we are under pressure by the international community, where they're saying you have to have a level of reporting of the finances, of how money moves in your country. We're trying to stop as best as possible drug money, you know, money laundering. If somebody steals somewhere and they bring the money here and just put it in the system and then it becomes clean, you know, they're trying to stop financing for terrorism. And so it is the OECD, these, you know, the Organization of Economic Developed Countries, are imposing these on us. So now we are being told, well, these are some of the legislation that we have to put in place. And one of them is this, the
NPO.
MPO, yes, sorry, the MPOs, where now we're saying that they also have to start to report where they get their monies from, and how the money is being spent. In no case, in no instance are we saying that they're doing anything illegal, please. But we are required to do this. Many people understand we lost when they started tightening up on money laundering and that kind of stuff. We lost about 80% of our corresponding banking relationships. Most of these international banks are saying, Belize, I'm sorry, you do everything legal, but the risk is too great.
For
One
too small
slip
a
you
market.
do, they're going to charge me $10 million. I didn't make what, $1 million or $2 million from you a year, it's not worth it.
Exactly.
And so now we have to do everything possible to protect this. And that's what we're doing. We have to do there are a number of legislation that has to be put in place, and this is one of them, and we have to put it in by June. And then by June, but then they are going to come and do a complete revision in December. And in December, one of the criticisms they were doing against our government, our country, against Belize, is that, with the Barrow administration, they were passing a lot of these legislation for the financial action task. But they were introducing legislation, passing legislation, but they were not enacting it. They were never really to work on it.
Yeah.
So now they're telling us, we don't want to see you pass the law, we want to see how
You actually
you're
implement
actually
it.
implementing it. And so we have to do that by December. So we have a limited time. We gave them an opportunity to be able to go to the host committee, and they gave a number of recommendations, and we accepted a number of them. But actually, we're making it easier for them. The reporting is much easier than before. They don't have to have, high-powered accountants and lawyers, because we're putting it for the smaller ones, a format where they just are filling out. So I think a lot of time, I think they will just say, oh my God, government want control. It has nothing to do, we have no interest in controlling what they do. It's simply that this is being forced on us to ensure that we can, as best as possible, stop any kind of money laundering, drug money, tourist money, any kind of dirty money to come into the system.
Finally,
And we have to protect the few corresponding banking relationships we have, because
Agreed.
if we lose that,
yes.
we're dead.
Yeah.
I wanted to move into the tourism sector. I know we're strapped for time. As far as Minister Mahler's report, yes, we can all see tourism is booming. But I wanted to get more into the cruising tourism aspect of it, particularly with your position on the port projects. And I needed to know if having only one port is the initial.
Let's put it this way: there has to be more than one port,
Okay.
because we already have one port. Fort George? What do you call it?
The harbor?
The harbor, the tourism, the
FSTV?
FSTV, yeah. Fort. What do you call it?
Fort Street Tourism
Fort
Village.
Street Tourism Village. Yes, yes.
Yes.
That's a port. Yeah, Fort Street.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's already
Yes.
deemed a port, no, quote unquote, not really, but we kind of push the.
Yeah.
But what we have said, I don't think that as a government it is incumbent on us to say, well, we want your project is on April, we want to take your one. I think you all have to come with your plan and to see which one will work on. And that's what we've been giving an opportunity to all three of them.
Okay.
We have not come in and say, well, we're going to Waterloo, or going with this one, or going with the State Bank or Port Panchical. So we are allowing them to be able to produce. They have to go through the process. They have to go through the NIAC. And once you pass the NIAC, then you come to us with your plans, and we will give you development concession. The market will decide. Because if, for instance, let's say for one reason that Waterloo gets the act together and pass through the NIAC and stop the fight government over everything and work on trying to get that done. If they can do that, and then they get the financing and start to work, nobody can go invest a Port Panchical and say, well, we have these two big ports right next to the other. It's not financially feasible. And the same thing would apply to State Bank, and State Bank has had the first jump at it, no? But we still
what
not
is
know
the-
when
the-
they finish.
the progress of the ports that have been approved?
Well, we have not approved any per se.
Okay.
So, State Bank has been approved, and
Yes.
they have been working for maybe 4 years now.
By now, they should have had
2018.
done,
They should have, according to their plans, they should have
Yes.
finished. But for one reason or another, they haven't.
Are there any conversations to extend where cruise ships would dock in Belize? Why is it that Belize City is the space that everybody wants to create a dock?
Because
What
Belize City, I wish it could be a Range Rock, but
Oh.
we don't have the
You don't have
sea.
the sea
I
front.
wish you'd have one at Coral
sort of an
and one by
adjustment.
PG
No, but,
and one by...
but we're working on that. No, but
Okay.
seriously, what's happened is that they come to Belize City because this is the center of the country, and from here it's easier to move to some of the more
Yep.
important sites. Hold on, don't get too excited.
It's a no-brainer, P. I
but
mean,
because-
forgive me, I mean,
because from
Belize
here-
is a
If you
central
were-
hub.
Yeah, but if you were to create more ports to improve
coming to that.
tourism throughout
Hold
the
on, hold
country,
on.
not just in one central
Don't get too
area.
excited, man. Allow me to
Okay.
finish. The point I was going to make now is that as it is right now, we have the Commerce Bight port that has been abandoned.
Down in Dangriga.
And yes, in Dangriga. And so what the area representative he has been doing, and with lots of consultation for the past year and a half, they're trying to see how they could now convert that into a cruise port, but for smaller ships. Remember, what drives tourism, another cruise tourism, it is the overnight stay. So we have to be very careful. We have to find that balance whereby we don't want, when you see, personally, I don't think it's in the interest of Belize to say we have exaggerated number, 10 million cruise passengers a year. Because what will happen?
The footprint.
You have people that pay a lot of money to come to reserves and enjoy it, and then but with cruise tourism, 1,000 will reach there and spend 1 hour, 2 hours, they run about the place, make a lot of noise, and then they have to hurry get out because they have to catch back the ship. So we have to find that balance.
You also have to consider the environmental footprint, though.
And that's upcoming, but well, that's a part of it. In the environment, we have to make sure that we could limit how many people, and that's, I just mentioned that during the budget debate, I was talking to the Minister Mala informally and said, you know what, it's important we start to, and Minister Fonseca, because with niche, we have to start to limit the amount of people that can go per day, say to Alton Half, for instance. You know, and so what Anthony was telling me, he's already, this day, he has people, his people are designing an app so that once you set that up, you, anywhere in the world, you could say, okay, I want to go to Alton Half on the 20th of July. So you could put in and you'd buy your ticket one time. So that
when it's booked
once
out,
that
it's
sell out,
booked out.
that's
Yeah.
you can't get in anymore. That are some of the kind of things that we have to do. Limit the amount of people that can go into all of our reserves, because we have a responsibility not only to our country but to the world for what we have been blessed with. I mean, I had for the first time I did a flyover with Carter Roberts, who is the CEO for WWF, over the marine reserves, and I was blown out. I mean, it's so breathtakingly beautiful. I mean, I can't describe it. You have to see it.
Yeah.
You know, and I've said to cabinet, we are arranging every cabinet member have the opportunity to see that and to see some of our reserves, so they could fully appreciate the work that we're doing in protecting these areas.
Finally, wrapping up, PM, where can we find a copy of this budget so that everybody could read it?
Actually, it's online, actually.
Okay.
So, but what I'll do, I'll send it to you, the link, so that then you could put it on.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Prime Minister, Honorable John Briceño, thank you so much. I
Whenever
feel like I'm
you touch
in
Taiwan,
I
we're
know,
supposed
I
to
feel
touch
like I'm
Taiwan,
in
you know,
full
Time flies by.
surprise when we're
But just quickly on Taiwan, we're very, two things I want to touch. Very quickly on Taiwan, that we're very excited that the President is coming
You have a
to
date.
visit
Yes,
Belize.
it does.
Coming on Sunday,
This-
Monday, Tuesday, this coming
this
weekend.
coming weekend.
Yes, and she will be addressing the National Assembly on Monday as part of the, I know on Tuesday she will be having an exposition, I think, or conference on empowering women. I know they've asked Rosanna to participate. So it's quite exciting to have one of our closest allies to come and visit Belize. And then also on, I think it's this Wednesday, or is it next week Wednesday, we will be having a summit, a regional summit, President, better known as AMLO, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, AMLO, called me 2 Mondays ago when I was traveling, coming home, that he is organizing a summit with 11 countries in the region to discuss the cost of living and how we can have food security and to reduce the cost of living. And Belize is the only country, along with St. Vincent and the Grenadines, that have been invited to join that. And I think you have Argentina, you have Bolivia, you have Honduras. Some of the countries, I think Colombia has also been invited to participate. Hopefully something can come up whereby we can
A little bit
bring in
of
some of these
optimism is
countries,
needed.
some of the some of
When
the
is this
food
conference?
items. It's going to be online.
Online.
So I think it's not this Wednesday and following Wednesday.
Okay.
So that's what's it's a quite exciting development. And to me, what is more exciting is that Mexico now is looking at us as a true partner, as a real partner, that they get us
Really?
involved in these things.
Yeah. We'll see more growth in the economy soon, I hope. And all I can say is I hope, because you never know, things happen. But PM, thank you so much for coming in. I know next time we have to block out like the whole show and just have one interview. But nevertheless, thank you so much for your time. Safe travels this morning. And with that, we are going to take a very short break because we have 2 more segments this morning. And we are moving into the Celebrate Her conversation, all about the Belize Center for Training and Development. So stay tuned, we'll be right back.